I'm Allison, 22 years old with big dreams of making it in the design world. My birthday was supposed to be special this year. I'd even convinced my parents to host dinner. What I didn't expect was walking in to find my cake replaced with one that read, "Congratulations, Brian, my golden boy brother stealing the spotlight again." When they kicked me out that night for being jealous, they had no idea what was coming. Before I continue, where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Growing up in suburban Michigan, I was always Brian's little sister. For years older than me, my brother was the definition of perfection in my parents' eyes. While most siblings have natural competition, ours was amplified by our parents' constant comparisons. Brian got straight A's again, my mother Angela would announce at dinner, beaming with pride. Then she'd turn to me, her smile fading slightly. "Allison, maybe he can help you with your math. Wouldn't that be nice?" I was never bad at school. I consistently brought home B's with occasional A's, but in our household, anything less than perfection was failure. By third grade, when parent-teacher conferences came around, I already knew the routine. My teachers would praise my creativity and artistic abilities, saying I had extraordinary talent for my age. My mother would nod politely, then immediately ask, "But what about her math scores? Is she applying herself enough?" My father Richard was less obvious, but equally complicit. A quiet accountant who believed in traditional success markers, he'd pat Brian on the back for winning science fairs while giving me distracted, "That's nice" responses when I showed him my art projects. I learned early that numbers and formulas earned real praise in our house. Paintbrushes and color theory did not. When I was 8, I won first place in a regional art competition. My painting was selected for display at our city's small museum, a huge honor. The ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. That morning, Brian received his acceptance letter to a prestigious summer science program. Guess which event my parents attended? I stood alone at the museum, watching other kids with their proud parents, while my grandmother Ruth took photos and tried to fill the obvious void. "Your parents love you, sweetheart," Grandma Ruth would say, squeezing my shoulder. "They just don't understand artistic minds." I was the same way, and my parents never understood me either. Grandma Ruth became my sanctuary. A former art teacher with a bohemian spirit, she lived just 15 minutes from our house. Every Saturday, I'd bike to her cottage-style home filled with paintings, sculptures, and the smell of turpentine and fresh cookies. She taught me techniques no elementary school art class would cover: color theory, perspective, textile work. In her sunroom studio, I felt valued for exactly who I was. "You have a gift, Allison," she'd tell me, studying my work with genuine interest. "Art isn't just pretty pictures, it's how some of us make sense of the world." My birthdays became particularly painful milestones. When I turned 10, my party was postponed because Brian had a debate tournament. At 12, my birthday dinner became a dual celebration when Brian was named student council president that same day. By 14, I'd stopped expecting much, scheduling time with friends instead and avoiding family celebrations altogether. The pattern continued through high school. I developed my artistic skills, focusing on fashion design and sustainable materials, a passion ignited when Grandma Ruth showed me how to repurpose vintage clothing. Meanwhile, Brian excelled at everything academic, becoming valedictorian and receiving a full scholarship to an Ivy League school for pre-med. When I was 16, everything changed. Grandma Ruth, my biggest champion, was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Within 3 months, she was gone. At her funeral, I stood between my parents, feeling more alone than ever. They grieved their mother/mother-in-law, but I had lost my only ally. The night after the funeral, I found a package on my bed, Grandma Ruth's final gift. Inside was her collection of design books, art supplies, and a letter. "Dearest Allison, don't let anyone dim your light. Your art isn't just a hobby, it's your voice in this world. I've arranged something for you. Check the blue envelope. All my love, Grandma Ruth. The blue envelope contained information about a summer intensive program at Parsons School of Design in New York. She'd not only applied for me but had paid the tuition in full. It would be my first time away from home, my first real step toward independence. When I told my parents, my father looked concerned about the logistics while my mother pursed her lips. Wouldn't your time be better spent preparing for college applications? Real colleges, Allison. Art school isn't exactly a secure future. I went anyway. Those 6 weeks in New York transformed me. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who valued creativity and innovation. My instructors praised my sustainable fashion concepts, particularly my work with recycled materials. One even suggested I apply to their undergraduate program the following year. I returned home with a portfolio and determination. I applied to 5 art and design schools in secret, using the money Grandma Ruth had left me for application fees. When the acceptance letters came, including one from Parsons with a partial scholarship, I finally stood up to my parents. The argument lasted for days. My mother insisted I was throwing my life away. My father worried about finances and my employability. Brian, home from college for the weekend, surprisingly came to my defense. Let her try, he said quietly at dinner. She's good at this. Really good. My mother looked at him with shock, as if he'd betrayed some unspoken family pact. In the end, we compromised. I would attend State University's design program, close to home, but with a decent reputation in the field. Not Parsons, but a start. As I packed for college, I found one more gift from Grandma Ruth tucked inside her old sketchbook, a vintage silver locket containing her picture and a tiny handwritten note. Art requires courage. You have both. I've worn it every day since. For years passed quickly at State University. While Brian excelled at Princeton Medical School, collecting honors and accolades that my mother shared enthusiastically on social media, I quietly built my own path. The design program wasn't Parsons, but it offered solid fundamentals and surprising opportunities. By junior year, I'd found my niche in sustainable fashion, combining environmental science concepts with innovative design. My professors took notice, especially Professor Mitchell, who became the mentor I'd been missing since Grandma Ruth. The industry is shifting, Allison, she told me during office hours. Fast fashion is destroying our planet. Your concepts for biodegradable textiles and zero-waste patterns are exactly what forward-thinking companies are looking for. During those years, I developed a small but solid circle of friends who understood me. Most important was Kate, my high school acquaintance who had reconnected with me during sophomore year when we shared an environmental science elective. Unlike my childhood friends who drifted away, unable to understand my family dynamics, Kate saw through the facade immediately. Your parents are textbook narcissists, she declared after witnessing one particularly painful family dinner she'd been invited to. And they've made your brother the golden child. It's not your fault, and it's not his either, but you need to recognize the pattern. Kate's psychology major perspective helped me name what I'd experienced my entire life. With her encouragement, I started setting boundaries, limiting home visits, screening my mother's calls, practicing responses to passive-aggressive comments. Slowly, I reclaimed my self-worth. By senior year, I'd won 2 regional design competitions and completed an internship with a small but respected sustainable fashion label in Chicago. My graduate collection was selected for the university's prestigious year-end showcase, where industry professionals would be in attendance. Things were finally coming together professionally, even if my family remained unimpressed. As my 22nd birthday approached in late April, I felt a familiar mix of hope and dread. Part of me still yearned for my parents' approval, still wished for that perfect birthday where I felt truly celebrated for who I was. Kate warned me against setting myself up for disappointment, but I couldn't help it. This year will be different, I told her as we grabbed coffee between classes. I'm about to graduate. I've had some success, and Brian won't even be there since he's doing that hospital rotation in Baltimore. Kate gave me her patented skeptical look. And what makes you think they'll suddenly see your worth now? I shrugged, tracing the rim of my coffee cup. Mom actually called to suggest dinner at their house. She said, and I quote, "We should celebrate your birthday properly this year." That's progress, right? Kate's expression softened. Just protect your heart, okay? Maybe have backup plans with us for later, regardless of how dinner goes. My friends had already arranged a small celebration for the Saturday after my birthday, dinner at my favorite Thai restaurant, and dancing afterward. But my actual birthday was on Wednesday, and something in me still craved that family acknowledgement. The week before my birthday, I threw myself into preparations. I bought a new dress, a vintage-inspired blue number that I'd modified with sustainable materials as practice for my final collection. I even splurged on having my hair done, something I rarely justified on my tight student budget. What I hadn't told anyone, not even Kate, was that I'd entered the Sustainable Future Design Competition, one of the most prestigious contests for emerging designers. The grand prize included a $100,000 grant for developing an eco-friendly fashion line and a year-long paid internship in Paris. I'd submitted my portfolio focused on biodegradable formal wear, evening dresses that could be composted after wearing, returning completely to the earth within 6 months. 2 days before my birthday, I received an email. I was one of 5 finalists. They wanted me in New York in 3 weeks for the final presentation. I stared at my phone in disbelief, reading the message 10 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My first instinct was to call my parents and share the news, but something held me back. Years of disappointment had taught me caution. Instead, I decided I would tell them at my birthday dinner when we were face to face. Maybe this accomplishment, being recognized by industry leaders, would finally make them see my path was legitimate. The night before my birthday, I called Brian to share my excitement about both the dinner and the competition news. "That's incredible, Allie," he said, sounding genuinely impressed. "The competition thing is huge. Are you going to tell Mom and Dad tomorrow?" "I think so," I replied, twisting Grandma Ruth's locket between my fingers. "If the timing feels right." There was a pause on the line. "Just manage your expectations, okay? You know how they are." "They invited me for dinner, Brian. For my birthday. That has to mean something, right?" Another pause. "Right," he finally said. "Of course." We chatted a bit more about his rotation and my upcoming graduation before hanging up. Despite his warning, I went to sleep feeling hopeful. Tomorrow, I'd be 22. Maybe it would finally be my turn to shine in my parents' eyes. My birthday dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed designed for celebration. I spent the morning in classes, receiving texts from friends and a particularly sweet video message from Kate singing an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday. My father sent a simple "Happy Birthday, kiddo" text, while my mother's message reminded me that dinner was at 6:30 sharp and to wear something nice. I arrived at my parents' suburban home at exactly 6:25, smoothing down my blue dress as I walked up the familiar brick pathway. Immediately, I noticed something odd. There were at least 6 cars parked in the driveway and along the street. My parents rarely entertained, and they certainly hadn't mentioned other guests for my birthday dinner. A flutter of anxiety rippled through my stomach. Had they planned a surprise party? That would be unprecedented. Or were these cars unrelated to my dinner? I clutched the small portfolio I'd brought containing printed images of my competition designs, suddenly unsure about sharing my news. As I approached the front door, I could hear the murmur of multiple conversations and occasional laughter from inside. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell instead of using my key. Somehow it felt wrong to just walk in. My father opened the door, looking surprisingly formal in a button-up shirt and tie. "Allison, there you are." His greeting was cheerful but distracted, and he was already turning back toward the living room as I stepped inside. The house was filled with people, family, friends, relatives, my parents' colleagues. At least 20 faces turned toward me as I entered, offering brief smiles before returning to their conversations. A banner hung across the dining room entrance, but from my position, I couldn't read it. "What's going on?" I asked, following my father through the crowd. "I thought we were having dinner for my birthday." The words died in my throat as I reached the dining room and finally saw the banner. "Congratulations, Brian." In the center of the table sat an elaborate cake decorated with a stethoscope and medical caduceus. No birthday candles. No happy birthday, Allison. And then I saw him, Brian, standing by the bay window, surrounded by admirers. He wasn't supposed to be in Baltimore on rotation. He was here, in Michigan, at what was clearly a celebration in his honor. My mother spotted me and bustled over, wine glass in hand. "Allison, finally. Isn't this wonderful?" Brian received the Stevenson Award for Medical Excellence. Only one student in the entire country gets it each year. "We're so proud." I stood frozen, clutching my portfolio to my chest like a shield. But tonight was supposed to be my birthday dinner. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "We can celebrate your birthday any day, but this is special. Brian had to fly in just for tonight and leaves again tomorrow morning." She lowered her voice, adding, "I got a small cake for you too, in the kitchen. We can bring it out after Brian's celebration." The room seemed to tilt slightly. An afterthought. I was an afterthought. Again. "You could have called me," I said, my voice barely audible over the party noise. "You could have let me know the plans had changed." "Don't start, Allison," my mother warned, her smile fading. "This is important. Brian has accomplished something extraordinary. And my birthday isn't important? Not even worth a phone call to reschedule." Several nearby guests glanced our way, and my mother's expression hardened as she gripped my elbow, steering me toward the hallway for privacy. "Why do you always have to make everything about you?" she hissed once we were alone. "Your brother has achieved something remarkable and all you can think about is a birthday dinner? You'll have plenty of birthdays. This is a once-in-a-lifetime honor for Brian." Hot tears pricked at my eyes. It's always about Brian. Always. Just once, I wanted one day to be about me. "Oh, for heaven's sake," my mother snapped. "This is exactly your problem, Allison. You're just jealous of your perfect brother. He works hard for his achievements while you waste time on your little hobby and expect the same recognition." Each word felt like a physical blow. My little hobby got me into the finals of the most prestigious design competition in the country. I blurted out, immediately regretting revealing my news this way. My mother's expression shifted from anger to dismissive disbelief. "What competition? Is this another one of those student art shows?" Before I could respond, my father appeared in the hallway. "Angela, they're ready to make the toast." His eyes darted between us, clearly sensing tension. "Everything okay here?" "Allison is upset that we're celebrating Brian tonight instead of having her birthday dinner," my mother explained, making me sound like a petulant child. My father sighed, looking uncomfortable but not surprised. "Honey, we can celebrate your birthday this weekend. Tonight is important for your brother. Please don't make a scene." "A scene?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I showed up for my birthday dinner and found a surprise party for Brian instead. I'm not making a scene, I'm reacting to one." My father's expression hardened. "Lower your voice. We have guests." "Guests for Brian's party," I corrected him. "Not for my birthday. Let's be clear about that." Brian appeared in the hallway then, his expression concerned. "Everything okay? They're waiting for us for the toast." My mother immediately brightened. "Of course. We're coming right now." She shot me a warning look. Allison was just expressing her disappointment about the change of plans. Brian looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Allie, I'm sorry. I didn't know tonight was supposed to be your birthday dinner. Mom just told me to come home for a celebration." Of course he didn't know. Brian wasn't the villain in this story. He never had been. He was just the unwitting beneficiary of our parents' skewed priorities. "It's fine," I said, not meaning it at all. "Congratulations on your award." "Why don't you join us?" he offered, trying to include me. "Then maybe after the toast, we could mention your birthday too?" Before I could respond, my mother cut in sharply. "This isn't a joint celebration, Brian. Allison can have her moment another time. Tonight is about your achievement." Something inside me snapped. Years of being secondary, of swallowing disappointment, of making myself smaller to accommodate my brother's greatness, it all came rushing to the surface. "I'm not staying," I announced, my voice surprisingly steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "I came for my birthday dinner, not to be an audience member at Brian's celebration." My mother's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. So selfish, so immature. If you can't be happy for your brother's success without making it about you, then maybe you should leave." "Angela," my father cautioned, glancing nervously toward the living room full of guests. "No, Richard, I'm tired of walking on eggshells around her fragile ego," my mother continued, her voice rising. "Brian works incredibly hard for real achievements, while she plays with fabric scraps and expects the same recognition. It's ridiculous." The portfolio in my hands suddenly felt heavy. Inside were designs that industry professionals had deemed innovative enough to place me among 5 finalists nationwide, but to my mother, they were just fabric scraps. Brian stepped toward me. "Allie, don't go." "Mom didn't mean dash." "Yes, I did mean it," our mother interrupted. It's time someone told her the truth. Art school, design competitions, they're not real accomplishments, not like medicine or law or business. They're hobbies people pursue when they can't handle real academic challenges. Each word cut deeper than the last. I looked at my father, searching for any sign of defense or disagreement, but he merely looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. "Say something, Dad," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Do you agree with her? Is that what you both think of me?" His silence was answer enough. Tears now flowing freely, I turned to leave. My mother's voice followed me down the hallway. "That's right, run away when things get difficult." Very mature. "If you want to act like a child on your birthday, go ahead, but don't expect us to indulge it. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back until you've grown up and can be supportive of this family." I paused at the front door, turning to face them one last time. My father looked pained but silent. My mother stood with arms crossed, unyielding. Brian hovered between them, conflict evident on his face. "I won't be back," I said quietly. "Not until you can see me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be." With that, I walked out into the evening air, the door closing firmly behind me. As I reached my car, I heard the muffled sound of applause and cheering from inside, the toast for Brian beginning right on schedule. I drove aimlessly through familiar streets, tears blurring my vision until I finally pulled over in the parking lot of Riverside Park, the place where Grandma Ruth and I used to sketch on Sunday afternoons. The spring evening was growing cool, but I didn't care as I sat on our favorite bench overlooking the water, my portfolio clutched to my chest like a life preserver. My phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from Brian expressing concern and apologizing, though noticeably nothing from my parents. I finally called the one person I knew would understand. They replaced my birthday dinner with a party for Brian, I told Kate, my voice breaking as I recounted the evening's events. My mom said my design work is just playing with fabric scraps and not a real accomplishment. Kate's outrage on my behalf was immediate and fierce. "That's emotional abuse, Allison. Plain and simple. You know that, right? Where are you now? I'm coming to get you." Within 20 minutes, Kate's beat-up Honda pulled into the parking lot. She took one look at me sitting tear-stained in my birthday dress and wrapped me in a tight hug. "You're staying with me tonight," she declared, brooking no argument. "Tomorrow too, if you need. Actually, screw it. Stay as long as you need." That night in Kate's apartment, curled up on her pull-out sofa with borrowed pajamas and a mug of hot chocolate, I scrolled through years of family photos on my phone. Birthday after birthday where Brian's achievements somehow took center stage. Holidays where my gifts were practical while his were extravagant. Family vacations where we visited medical schools while I sat in the hotel sketching. The pattern was so clear, so consistent, I wondered how I hadn't fully recognized it before. Do you remember my 16th birthday? I asked Kate, who was sitting cross-legged beside me. They gave me a scientific calculator because Brian said I'd need it for college physics. Even though you'd already told them you wanted to study art, Kate added, rolling her eyes. Classic. And my high school graduation dinner became all about Brian's research internship. Kate nodded grimly. I was there for that one. Your mom spent 20 minutes showing everyone his acceptance letter. The more we talked, the more examples surfaced, creating a painful mosaic of systematic dismissal. By morning, my sadness had hardened into something else, a mixture of anger and resolve that felt unfamiliar but necessary. The next week passed in a fog of emotions. I stayed with Kate, attending classes mechanically while processing the finality of my mother's words. Brian texted daily, increasingly concerned when I didn't return home or respond to our parents' eventual messages, terse texts from my father asking when I was coming to my senses, and a remarkably unapologetic voicemail from my mother suggesting I was overreacting as usual. They're incapable of seeing what they did wrong, I told Professor Mitchell during office hours, having shared the situation when she noticed my distracted performance in class. Is it wrong to just give up on them ever understanding me? Professor Mitchell removed her glasses thoughtfully. Family is complicated, Allison. As someone who hasn't spoken to my own father in 15 years, I can tell you that sometimes distance is necessary for your own well-being. The question is, what do you need right now to move forward? What I needed was to feel valued, to have my work taken seriously. But as days passed and the competition deadline loomed, I found myself spiraling into doubt. What if my mother was right? What if sustainable fashion design was just a hobby, not a real career path? The voice in my head that usually sounded like Grandma Ruth was being drowned out by my mother's dismissive tone. 10 days after my birthday disaster, I hit rock bottom. Sitting on Kate's bathroom floor at 2 a.m., I stared at my competition materials spread around me and considered withdrawing. The imposter syndrome that had always lurked at the edges of my consciousness now consumed me entirely. Who was I to think I could win a national design competition? Who was I to imagine a future in Paris working alongside industry innovators? Kate found me there an hour later when she got up for water. Without a word, she sat beside me on the cold tile floor. I think I should withdraw from the competition, I whispered. I'm not ready. My designs aren't good enough. Kate was quiet for a long moment, surveying the sketches and fabric samples surrounding us. Then she picked up my portfolio and began flipping through it purposefully. This is your mother talking, not you, she finally said, holding up my most innovative design, a formal gown made entirely from algae-based textiles that would biodegrade completely within 6 months of disposal. This is brilliant, Allison. This is the future of fashion. But what if No, Kate interrupted firmly. I've watched you shrink yourself for years to avoid outshining your brother in your parents' eyes. I've seen you downplay your talents and achievements because they made you feel they weren't valuable. But I won't sit here and watch you sabotage your future because of their limitations. She gathered my materials, stacking them deliberately. Your parents might never understand your work, but that doesn't diminish its value. You need to decide, right now, if you're going to let their narrow vision determine your path, or if you're going to claim your own success regardless of their approval. Her words hit with the force of truth. I thought of Grandma Ruth's note. Art requires courage, and realized this was exactly the moment she'd been preparing me for. The next morning, I made an appointment with Professor Mitchell and brought my entire portfolio. For 3 hours, we reviewed every aspect of my competition entry, identifying weaknesses and refining concepts. Her critique was tough but constructive, pushing me to strengthen areas where my designs weren't fully realized. The committee is looking for innovation, sustainability, and marketability, she explained, rearranging my presentation boards. Your concepts are strongest in the first two areas, but you need to address how these designs could be produced at scale. That's what will set you apart from other finalists who have beautiful concepts that could never be manufactured. As we worked, Professor Mitchell shared her own story, how her traditional Indian family had disowned her when she chose fashion design over medicine, how she'd struggled for years before finding success, how she'd eventually reconciled with her mother but never with her father. Success is the best revenge, Allison, she told me, her eyes serious behind her stylish glasses. Not because it proves them wrong, but because it proves you right about yourself. That afternoon, I returned to Kate's apartment with renewed determination. The competition was in 2 weeks, and I had extensive revisions to make. I also needed to figure out how to afford the trip to New York. My limited savings wouldn't cover airfare and accommodations, and I certainly couldn't ask my parents now. "We'll figure it out," Kate promised. One step at a time. The first step was clear. I needed to permanently move out of my parents' house. Though I'd been living in a campus apartment during school terms, many of my belongings remained at home, and I'd planned to move back after graduation while job hunting. That was no longer an option. The 2 weeks following my birthday became a period of intense transformation. With Kate's unwavering support and Professor Mitchell's guidance, I immersed myself in refining my competition entry, working late into the night and rising early to continue. My designs evolved from promising concepts to a cohesive collection with clear manufacturing pathways, exactly what the judges would be looking for. "You've always had the talent," Professor Mitchell noted during our final review session. "Now you have the confidence to match it." The confidence was new, born from necessity rather than nurture. Without my parents' safety net, I had no choice but to believe in myself. Every decision now rested squarely on my shoulders, from finding affordable New York accommodations to planning my post-graduation future. The financial challenge of the competition trip remained daunting. The presentation was in New York in just 10 days, requiring airfare, hotel, and professional printing costs I couldn't afford. When I reluctantly mentioned withdrawing due to finances, my small circle of design school friends mobilized with startling speed. "We're not letting this happen," declared Marcus, a fellow senior who'd often critiqued my work. He created an online fundraiser sharing my story and designs, with my permission, reaching out to alumni and local design professionals. Kate organized a flash sale of student artwork at a popular campus coffee shop, with proceeds going toward my trip. Within 3 days, they'd raised enough to cover my basic expenses. Professor Mitchell added to the fund by arranging for me to receive an early installment of a department scholarship I'd been awarded for senior excellence. The department also offered to cover my printing costs as an investment in a promising alumna. "People believe in you, Allison," Kate pointed out as we calculated the funds. "All these people see what your parents couldn't." Their support humbled and motivated me. Each late night felt purposeful, each design decision weighted with the responsibility of honoring their faith in me. I was no longer creating to prove my worth to my parents. I was creating because this was my path, my contribution to the world. During this period, Brian called daily, increasingly concerned about the growing rift between me and our parents. Though I'd briefly explained the competition, he couldn't fully grasp why I wouldn't at least speak with them. "They're worried about you," he insisted during one call. "Are they worried about me or worried about losing control over me?" I countered. "Because there's a difference, Brian. They're not perfect, Allie, but they're still our parents. And I'm still their daughter. The one they told not to come back until I can be supportive of this family, remember? Which apparently means accepting that my work doesn't matter." Brian went quiet, then sighed. "I never wanted this. I never asked to be the favorite." "I know," I said softly. "It's not your fault. But I need to focus on my future right now, and that means setting boundaries with them." Those boundaries became concrete when I arranged to retrieve my remaining belongings from my parents' house. Timing the visit for when I knew they'd be at work, I enlisted Kate and Marcus to help load my childhood into Kate's Honda and Marcus's pickup truck. Clothes, books, art supplies, mementos, the physical artifacts of a life I was now consciously leaving behind. In my childhood bedroom, I found a box of drawings Grandma Ruth had saved from my elementary years, artwork my parents had dismissed, but she had treasured. Each childish sketch was carefully dated and annotated in her handwriting. Allison's first perspective drawing, so advanced for 8 years old, and notice her intuitive use of complementary colors. She has natural talent. Sitting on my stripped bed, surrounded by these validations from the past, I felt Grandma Ruth's presence strongly. She had seen me clearly from the beginning. She had prepared me for this very moment of separation and growth. Before leaving, I wrote a brief note explaining that I was moving out permanently and would be in touch when I was ready. I left it on the kitchen counter with my house key. No anger, no accusations, just a clear statement of fact. I was choosing myself, perhaps for the first time. The final week before the competition was a blur of preparation. I practiced my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep, anticipating questions and refining my responses. My sustainable formal wear collection, which I'd named Ephemeral Elegance, was fully realized through detailed technical drawings, material samples, and prototype pieces I'd constructed. The night before my flight to New York, I sat with Kate on her tiny balcony, sharing a bottle of cheap wine and looking at the stars. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, raising her plastic cup, "you've already won. You chose yourself. That's the hardest part." I touched my glass to hers, feeling a strange sense of peace despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. "I couldn't have done it without you." Kate shook her head. "I just reminded you of what you already knew. The strength was always there. You just needed permission to use it." Permission. That was it exactly. All these years, I'd been waiting for permission from my parents to pursue my passion, to believe in my talent. Now I was giving myself that permission, regardless of their approval. The next morning, as I boarded the plane to New York with my carefully packed portfolio, I touched Grandma Ruth's locket around my neck and whispered, "Watch me fly." New York greeted me with characteristic indifference, a crowded JFK terminal, an overpriced taxi ride, and a tiny hotel room in a budget hotel that smelled faintly of cigarettes despite its non-smoking policy. None of it dampened my spirits. I was in New York for the Sustainable Future Design Competition, and tomorrow I would present my collection to some of the most influential names in fashion. That evening, I met the 4 other finalists at a mixer hosted by the competition organizers. There was Matteo from Parsons, whose work with recycled industrial materials had earned him features in several design magazines, Sophia from RISD, whose plant-based leather alternatives were already attracting industry attention, James from Fit, whose zero-waste pattern cutting techniques had revolutionized his school's curriculum, and Aisha from SCD, whose solar-powered textiles combined technology and sustainability in groundbreaking ways. Among these innovative designers from prestigious schools, my imposter syndrome threatened to resurface. I was just Allison from State University, with my biodegradable formalwear that had seemed so impressive in Michigan, but now felt ordinary in this company. "First competition?" Sophia asked, noticing my nervous energy as we examined the presentation space. I nodded, adjusting my display for the 5th time. "That obvious, huh?" She smiled kindly. "We're all nervous, trust me. But your work is incredible. I noticed your algae-based textiles during setup. The drape is amazing. How did you achieve that level of flexibility?" Her genuine interest caught me off guard. Soon we were deep in a technical discussion about biopolymer structures and textile engineering. James and Matteo joined, each offering insights and asking thoughtful questions about my process. For the first time, I was engaged in conversation with peers who spoke my language, who understood the challenges and possibilities of sustainable design at a molecular level. This is what I've been missing, I realized as we continued talking over dinner. Not just validation, but community, people who could push my thinking and expand my vision. Back in my hotel room, I made final adjustments to my presentation and fell into an exhausted sleep, dreaming of biodegradable ball gowns floating through ocean currents, transforming into gardens of sea flowers. Morning came too quickly. In the competition venue, a sleek gallery space in Chelsea, I set up my display with surprisingly steady hands. The judges would see each finalist individually, allowing 20 minutes for presentation and questions. I was scheduled third, giving me 90 minutes of anxious waiting. As my time approached, a familiar voice called my name. I turned to find Brian, dressed in a suit and looking completely out of place among the fashion crowd. "Brian," I gasped, momentarily sure I was hallucinating. "What are you doing here? How did you even know Dash?" "Kate told me," he explained, looking sheepish. "I called her when you weren't answering my texts. I caught the first flight I could get. I wouldn't miss this, Allie." Before I could respond, a competition coordinator appeared. "Allison Parker? The judges are ready for you." Brian squeezed my hand. "You've got this. I'll be right here." Walking into the judging room felt like entering another dimension. 5 industry leaders sat behind a long table, the creative director of a major fashion house, the sustainability officer from a luxury conglomerate, an influential fashion journalist, a renowned textile innovator, and the competition's founder, a veteran designer who had pioneered sustainable practices decades before they were trendy. 20 minutes isn't long to present a lifetime of passion, but somehow I found my voice. I explained how my grandmother's influence had shaped my sustainability focus, how my biodegradable formal wear addressed both environmental concerns and market demands for special occasion clothing. I demonstrated how my algae-based fabrics could be produced at scale, using existing manufacturing infrastructure, reducing barriers to industry adoption. The questions came rapid fire. What's the production cost comparison to traditional materials? How would you address consumer concerns about garment longevity? Can your construction techniques be adapted for ready-to-wear applications? With each answer, I felt more confident, more certain that I belonged in this room with these experts. When my time ended, the competition founder asked one final question: why formal wear specifically? Most sustainable designers focus on everyday clothing. I thought of all the special moments in life. Graduations, weddings, celebrations, captured in photographs and memories. Because special occasions deserve special attention, I replied. These are the garments we remember, the ones we photograph and cherish. If we can make these milestone moments environmentally conscious, without sacrificing beauty or meaning, we change the narrative about sustainability being a compromise. She nodded thoughtfully, making a final note. As I gathered my materials, the textile innovator leaned forward. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said quietly, gesturing to the locket I'd been unconsciously touching throughout my presentation. Outside, Brian was waiting with a bouquet of sustainably grown wildflowers. "You're amazing," he said simply. "I've always known it, but seeing you in there, you're in a whole different league, Allie." We spent the afternoon exploring New York, carefully avoiding discussion of our parents. Brian shared stories from medical school that revealed his own struggles with our parents' expectations, the pressure to be perfect, the fear of disappointing them, the exhaustion of constantly performing. "I'm not as strong as you," he admitted as we sat in Central Park. "I've never had the courage to defy them." "It's not about defiance," I corrected him. "It's about authenticity. Living your truth, even when it's inconvenient for others." "Is your truth sustainable fashion?" he asked, smiling at the wordplay. I nodded, realizing how certain I felt. "It always has been. I just needed to believe it was valuable." The awards ceremony that evening was held in a rooftop venue overlooking the city skyline. All 5 finalists stood nervously as the competition founder approached the microphone. "Sustainable fashion is no longer a niche interest," she began. "It is the only viable future for our industry." These 5 designers represent different approaches to that future, each valuable and necessary. She announced the runners-up one by one, each receiving significant recognition and smaller grants. When only Aisha and I remained, I gripped Brian's hand tightly, already grateful to have made it this far. The grand prize goes to a designer who demonstrated not only technical innovation, but a profound understanding of how sustainability can enhance rather than compromise the emotional experience of fashion. Time seemed to slow as she opened the envelope. Allison Parker, 4, Ephemeral Elegance. The room erupted in applause as I stood frozen in disbelief. Brian pushed me gently forward, and somehow I made it to the stage, accepting the Crystal Award with trembling hands. "Thank you," I managed, looking out at the crowd of industry professionals. "This collection honors my grandmother, who taught me that art requires courage and that true beauty returns to the earth without harm." The next hours passed in a blur of congratulations, business cards, and opportunities. The luxury conglomerate's sustainability officer wanted to discuss potential development support. The fashion journalist requested an exclusive interview. The textile innovator offered mentorship. The $100,000 grant and Paris internship were life-changing, but these connections were equally valuable. In our hotel lobby at midnight, Brian finally called our parents. I sat beside him, still clutching my award, as he shared the news of my victory. "She won, Mom," he said, his voice firm as he cut through her confusion. "Allison won the most prestigious sustainable design competition in the country. $100,000 and a year in Paris." Yes, that Paris. No, I'm not exaggerating. It was in the New York Times online edition an hour ago. He met my eyes, covering the microphone. "They don't believe me," he whispered, looking both frustrated and sadly unsurprised. I shook my head, taking the phone. "It's true," I said simply. "But you don't have to believe it." "I do, and that's what matters now." I handed the phone back to Brian, feeling a strange sense of closure. Their validation, so desperately sought for years, now seemed irrelevant compared to the industry recognition I'd received, the peers who understood my work, and most importantly, my own confidence in my path. "Congratulations again, Ms. Parker," the hotel receptionist called as we headed toward the elevators. "We've had several deliveries for you." She gestured to a cart loaded with champagne, flowers, and cards from industry figures who'd attended the ceremony. Brian smiled, surveying the bounty of recognition. "Still think you need Mom and Dad's approval?" I touched Grandma Ruth's locket, thinking of how far I'd come since that devastating birthday just weeks ago. I never did, I realized. I just needed to approve of myself. 3 months after the competition, Paris welcomed me with open arms and endless possibilities. My apartment, a tiny 6th-floor walk-up in the 11th arrondissement with uneven floors and a temperamental water heater, became my sanctuary. Each morning, I walked to the atelier where my internship placed me alongside designers whose work I'd studied in textbooks, learning the practical realities of bringing sustainable concepts to market. My $100,000 grant funded the development of my first commercial collection, allowing me to refine my biodegradable textiles and establish relationships with ethical manufacturers. Industry publications featured my work in sustainability spotlights, and my social media following grew as eco-conscious consumers discovered my designs. Through it all, Kate remained my anchor, our daily video calls bridging the physical distance. She'd accepted a psychology research position in Boston, focusing on family dynamics and resilience. "Inspired," she said, "by watching my journey. You should write a book," she suggested during one late-night call. "From family scapegoat to fashion pioneer, it's the ultimate redemption story." I laughed, gesturing around my minuscule apartment. "Let me conquer sustainable fashion first, then I'll tackle publishing." My relationship with my parents remained complicated. 2 weeks after the competition, my father had sent a brief email. "Allison, I saw the article about your award in the business section. Impressive achievement. Your mother and I have been discussing things. Perhaps we could talk when you have time. Dad. No acknowledgement of their behavior, no apology for the birthday disaster, just recognition of my impressive achievement. Now that external validation had made it real. I waited 3 days before responding with equal brevity. Thank you. I'm preparing for my move to Paris, but will reach out when I'm settled. Allison. Brian became our family bridge, visiting me in Paris while maintaining relationships with our parents. He had taken a surprising stand after the competition, declining a prestigious fellowship our mother had pushed him toward in favor of a community health program he found more meaningful. Your courage inspired mine, he told me over coffee at a sidewalk cafe near Notre Dame. Watching you choose yourself made me realize I could do the same. By the 3-month mark in Paris, I felt ready to attempt reconnection. A video call was arranged, with Brian present on their end for moral support. Seeing my parents on screen, my father looking older than I remembered, my mother tense but trying to smile, stirred complicated emotions. Your apartment looks charming, my mother offered after awkward greetings. It's small but perfect for now, I replied, panning my laptop to show the sketches and fabric samples covering every surface. The atelier keeps me busy, and my collection development takes the rest of my time. My father cleared his throat. The grant money is being managed properly? You've considered tax implications? Even now, he approached me through the lens of practical concerns rather than emotional connection. Some things hadn't changed. I have an accountant who specializes in international arts grants, I assured him. Everything's properly managed. The conversation continued stiffly until Brian mentioned an upcoming fashion sustainability conference in New York where my work would be featured. That's quite an honor, my father said, sounding genuinely impressed. Several major retailers will be there, I explained, warming to the topic I knew best. There's growing interest in commercial applications for biodegradable formalwear, especially for wedding markets. Wedding dresses that decompose, my mother mused, her expression unreadable. Who would want that? The old familiar sting of dismissal rose, but I pushed through it. Environmentally conscious brides who understand that a garment worn once shouldn't burden the planet for centuries. The market research shows significant demand, especially among millennials. She nodded slowly, not agreeing but at least not arguing. Progress of a sort. We saw your feature in Fashion Forward, my father mentioned, surprising me. They'd never shown interest in industry publications before. Your grandmother would have been very proud. The unexpected reference to Grandma Ruth caught me off guard. You kept the magazine? We have all of them, my mother admitted quietly. And the newspaper articles. Brian sends them. Something shifted in that moment. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. They were trying, in their limited way, to understand the path I'd chosen. It wasn't enough to heal all wounds, but it was something to build upon. When we ended the call, I felt strangely lighter. The validation I'd once desperately sought from them now seemed less important than the boundaries I'd established. We would never have the close relationship I'd wished for as a child, but perhaps we could develop a new dynamic based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. Over the following months, our communication settled into a sustainable rhythm, monthly video calls, occasional emails sharing professional news, small steps toward a new normal. My mother still made tone-deaf comments about the practicality of my career, but I developed the confidence to let them slide rather than seeking her understanding. 6 months after moving to Paris, I returned to Michigan briefly for a university alumni event where I'd been invited to speak about sustainable entrepreneurship. Though anxious about seeing my parents in person, I arranged to meet them for lunch at a neutral restaurant rather than their home. The meeting was neither a disaster nor a Hollywood reconciliation. My mother brought a folder of press clippings about my work, awkwardly presenting it as if submitting evidence that she'd been paying attention. My father asked thoughtful questions about textile biodegradability, engaging with the science in a way that felt like genuine interest. Neither directly acknowledged the birthday incident or their years of dismissing my path, but their efforts to connect on my terms suggested an unspoken recognition of past mistakes. "Your collection launches next month," my father confirmed as we finished dessert. I nodded. "Small scale initially, exclusive boutiques in Paris, London, and New York that specialize in sustainable luxury. If reception is good, we'll expand to department store partnerships next year." "We'd like to see it sometime," my mother said carefully. "Perhaps when you're back for Christmas?" The old Allison would have jumped at this opening, desperate for their interest. The new Allison considered it thoughtfully. "The holiday timing might be tight with production schedules," I replied honestly. "But I'll be back in February for Fashion Week. That would be a better opportunity to show you the collection properly." Setting boundaries didn't mean rejecting connection, it meant establishing healthy terms for it. They seemed to understand, nodding acceptance of my timeline rather than pushing their preference. As my 23rd birthday approached, I decided to celebrate it my way. A dinner party at my Paris apartment with new friends and colleagues, the chosen family I'd built in my new life. Kate flew in for the weekend, bringing a vintage jewelry box she'd found that matched Grandma Ruth's aesthetic perfectly. "To your first year of freedom," she toasted, raising her glass as we gathered around my makeshift dining table. "And to many more." Looking around at these people who valued me for exactly who I was, I felt profound gratitude for the painful birthday that had catalyzed my transformation. Being kicked out that night had been the push I needed to find my true path and my authentic voice. The sustainable fashion industry still presented daily challenges. Changing consumer perceptions, navigating manufacturing limitations, balancing ethical commitments with commercial viability. None of it was easy. But neither was breaking free from limiting family dynamics, and I'd managed that seemingly impossible task. My journey from overlooked daughter to award-winning designer wasn't just about professional success. It was about learning that external validation can never replace self-belief, that sometimes the people who should support you the most are incapable of doing so, and that finding your tribe of like-minded souls is essential to thriving. As I prepare to launch my first commercial collection next month, I still wear Grandma Ruth's locket every day. It reminds me that our legacies continue through those who truly see us, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the courage to choose ourselves. So let me ask you, what dream are you putting on hold while waiting for someone else's approval? What would happen if you gave yourself permission to pursue it anyway? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life journeys of finding strength through adversity. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the most painful moments. Thank you for being part of my story, and I can't wait to hear yours.